Hello, friends.
Oh,
How is everybody?
good afternoon.
Thank you. Hello and welcome. Sorry we're a few minutes late. It's my pleasure. I'm Ken Owen, by the way. I'm the Special Advisor to the President at DePauw and also the coordinator of the Ubben Lecture Series. 1982 graduate, and I'm thrilled today to welcome President Juan Manuel Santos to DePauw University. Nobel Peace Prize winner. He's the 9th Nobel Peace Prize winner we've had, the 11th Nobel laureate overall. He's a champion of, I think, communication, which is one thing we'll hear about today. We live in a time, we were talking on the way over, he's a former journalist. You're never a former journalist, are you?
No, you always have it in your blood.
Yes. But we were talking about the state of our information. And the tone of our politics today, no matter what side you're on, seems very angry. So I open it to your questions. First, I may ask the President if he has any opening statement he'd like to make, and then we'll open it to the floor.
Well, no, first of all, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I must confess, it's my first time in Indiana.
Ever.
But I'm so far having a great time. I had the opportunity to visit the governor this morning as soon as I arrived. We had a very interesting conversation, how he wants to internationalize Indiana, and he's been going around the world sort of establishing bridges, and I said, well, yeah, you must go south of Rio Grande because he hasn't visited any Latin American country. That's where the future is, and I said he would be most welcome to go to Colombia. Vice President Pence, his first visit to Latin America was to Colombia. His first call after being elected vice president was to the Colombian president. And the first visit that Trump is going to make to Latin America is going to be to Colombia. So I told the governor, you have to also go, first time you go to Latin America, go to Colombia. But we had a very interesting conversation, and now I'm here in the university, eager to hear your questions, and if I can answer them, I'll be more than delighted to answer them.
And with that, your questions.
How do you define global citizenship, and where do you see journalism playing a role within that?
Global citizenship, for me, I would define it as the ability of any person to contribute to the global well-being and the well-being of others, and especially in today's world, where anything you do anywhere in the world affects the rest of the world. You have to be very conscious of that. And I believe journalism is especially prepared, or should be prepared to show that whatever we do, for example, in terms of climate change, if you dump some plastic in the south of Africa, that will eventually affect the people in Europe or the people in Latin America, because of technology, the world is getting smaller and smaller. So you have to be conscious of that phenomena, of what that represents, of the responsibilities you have with the rest of the world. And the more you see that, the more you work with that perspective, the better citizen you will be of the world.
Please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hannah Storm. I'm with WGRE on our radio station at DePauw. And my question is, with the end of the long Civil War, what areas of the country that were perhaps previously neglected or suffering, how were they able to be further developed?
The peace agreement that we signed with the most potent, the largest and oldest guerrilla of the Americas. It was a unique peace agreement because besides having what traditional peace agreements have, which is something called the DDR, demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration of the insurgents into public or political life. We also negotiated for the first time something called the transitional justice. It's a different type of justice which is specifically authorized by the Rome Statute. The Rome Statute is an international agreement that depends on the International Criminal Court that allows a special justice to be applied to the most responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And the second element that we negotiated, which is very unique in this process, is exactly what you were asking. We agreed to design and execute 16 different development plans for the regions that had been abandoned by the state during the war, which means more than half a century. These were regions that had no presence of the state whatsoever. They are very rich regions from the agricultural point of view and in biodiversity and water and or resources of every kind, but has no development. So what we did was identify those 16 regions where the conflict was more concentrated, and we agreed that it would be the people of those regions the ones to decide the priorities on these development plans. And we have been having meetings with all the communities of these regions for the last 2 years. The 16 plans should be ready by December of this year, and they should start to be executed. They are already financed for the next 15 years. And the agreement says specifically it'll take 15 years because you have to build roads, build schools, build hospitals, take technology, simply develop those regions, and that's what we're doing, and this is one of the unique aspects of this agreement.
Other questions? I've got one for you. What can young people do in their daily lives to be champions of global citizenship?
Study hard. Young people, well, they have to, first of all, internalize the tremendous responsibility they have for building a better future for everybody. It's in their hands to take the decision to participate, to become active, to engage on the issues that are today affecting the world, and because if they don't do it, nobody will do it. The older generations have, in a way, done their job, and it's the new generations that have to take over. But they have to take over with the responsibility of making things better, of improving the well-being of humanity and protecting the well-being of humanity. That's why I personally think that challenges like stopping the increase in temperature in the world is so important. I come from a country which is very vulnerable to climate change. When I took over the presidency, that was the 7th of August of 2010. That morning, I went up to a very old, probably the oldest indigenous community still with pre-Hispanic ways of life. And I went to them, and as a signal of recognition, of respect to them, I said, I come to ask for your blessing to go to my Congress and get inaugurated. And they said, yes, sit down. And they said, we only asked that you do two things. Take care of Mother Nature, because Mother Nature is mad. And respect our culture. We have a different way of defining development. You might define development by having more roads, or if you have one car, to have two cars, or have a bigger house. We define development as being able to maintain our culture. But on the side of Mother Nature is mad, and you're going to unfortunately suffer because of that. I was a bit scared. I went, I got inaugurated, and next week, week after, the worst Niña phenomenon. This is the temperature that starts in the Pacific and makes either produces a lot of rain or produces a lot of drought. The Niña produces a lot of rain, and the worst Niña phenomenon ever concentrated in Colombia, and I had to deal with a country that was flooded, almost all the country, for almost 2 years. And that really triggered my interest in climate change, and we are a very, very rich country in terms of biodiversity. We are, as a matter of fact, the richest country in the world in terms of biodiversity per square kilometer. That means the concentration that we have of biodiversity is very, very important. And we have to take care of that, because that's what will allow human mankind to live. And that's why we are, and I have been so active in the climate change and the, what you call the Sustainable Development Goals. Colombia was the one, and forgive me if I speak in the first person, I was the one who proposed the Sustainable Development Goals in a summit in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil back in the year 2012. That became the world agenda, voted by the United Nations the year 2015. And those sustainable goals are now part of the commitment of everybody. And to answer your question about young people, for them to be conscious of the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals is very important.
Thank you. Yes, Maria.
Usually, or historically, in the past, globalization has often led to colonization and sort of colonial mindsets of people imposing their ideas. And you talked about development meaning, keeping the culture. How do you create the idea of global citizenship with ensuring that countries, or at least Western countries, don't impose their ideas on developing countries, but development doesn't necessarily mean towards a Western?
Well, there's a difference between globalization and imperialism.
Yeah, but historically, the colonization has been dressed up as globalization.
Well, the important challenge right now is to stop seeing globalization as a way to colonize or to make everybody agree with what you think.
Yeah.
The big challenge is to respect the differences that we have in the world. We are one world. We are one race, really, the human race. We're one planet, but we have a lot of differences among us, but we're one. If we understand that, then we can start respecting our differences. We have different religions, different races, but but we are one. And if you understand that and you respect the differences and how other people live that not necessarily coincide with your priorities and the way you live, then we can all live in peace and in happiness. If you don't respect it, well, you have to teach the young kids, since they're very young, to accept that other people can think differently, can have other opinions, and that even if they have different opinions, they can be your friends, or you can live with them. This is a cultural asset that we have to stimulate every day in our education system. Many times our education system was doing the contrary. The only people that are good are the ones that think like you do, like we did. That's wrong. Other cultures has the same reasons to claim that they were the good ones, and not we. So if we then start respecting each other, this world would be a bit better.
We have time for 2 more questions. Yes.
Varsity seem to be like the future to coping with the crisis of climate change that's happening right now. So I'm wondering what you think the implementation of this kind of system will mean for global citizenship, and how you think indigenous people in Colombia might be impacted by the implementation of smart cities. Because typically, like, when things like this grandiose and elitist are implemented, it's typically marginalized bodies who are the victims to it and
We did in Colombia something which I hope that this is replicated around the world. First, we recognize that the indigenous people are probably the most conscious of all the world in terms of the importance of protecting your environment. It's incredible if you speak to indigenous people here in the U.S., or you go to Canada, or you go to Latin America, or you go to Africa. They all had this common denominator: Mother Nature. You must respect Mother Nature, the respect for the water, for example. They all have this very strong feeling of you cannot allow the water to be contaminated or to be depleted. And what we did was we started protecting areas, huge areas. When I went out of government, I had signed decrees protecting 43 million hectares of areas that were considered strategic for the preservation of the environment and our biodiversity. And what we did was, for example, there's a huge park, natural reserve, in the Amazon. This is one of the lungs of the world. And so we declared this area a protected area, and then surrounded the park with land that we gave to the indigenous people. And they will protect the park with their lives. And it's like a buffer. And it's a way, and we gave the indigenous people much more autonomy, for example, in the way they educate their children. They want to educate their children, yes, with some of the Western ideas, but also with their ideas. Or the health, the way they manage their health system. It's different from ours. So we have to respect that. So it's a way to try to find a common ground in order for two civilizations to, or at least two kinds of people to be able to work and live together.
Final question, yes.
Hi, my name is Mariah, and I'm a peace and conflict studies and political science whether that's globally or locally or nationally, to kind of let our political leaders know that peace is something that's important to us for us young people who can't quite run for president yet.
When I was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Committee made organized an exposition about Nobel laureate, and they said we will put a title to your Peace Prize and to this exposition, which I think in a way is a resume of what we should do, is to have hope over fear, is to stimulate the positive things of life over the negatives, to stimulate love instead of hate, and that also has to do with the education. There are some positive values, positive sentiments, positive ways of behaving, and there's some negatives. And if you encourage people to always embrace the positive ones, you will be better off. We're humans. We can go to the negative sentiments. If something happens, we will feel fear, and we will maybe hate somebody who does bad to you. But if you are conscious that there are much more positive sentiments that you can, in a way, prioritize, then you will be much better off. Somebody who hates, and this happens a lot to politicians. A lot of people hated me, and I had no idea why. And I didn't even know that they hated me. Who suffers? They suffer. If I don't know that they hate me, it doesn't affect me. But if you hate, and you're conscious of the hate you have, and you feed that hate, you're the one that is losing. Jealousy, or if you're envious, it's not the person who is the object of this envy. It's the one who feels the envy, the one who really suffers. So if you're conscious of that, and then you start, in a way, controlling your sentiments. Not easy, but it's possible. That will encourage a much healthier environment to grow.
In a sense, it starts at the micro level. You be a nice person, have a positive attitude, things get better.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you guys for being here this afternoon.